In this video, I have to repeatedly say the word gigabyte. This will be extremely hard for me, as I am an avid Back to the Future fan, so I tend to say gigabyte. I hope I don't offend anyone with the lack of proper pronunciation. However, if it was good enough for Doc Brown, it's good enough for me.
21 gigawatts!
The current generation of MPCs have been among some of my favorite music making machines to date. With content firmware updates that have managed to reinvent them time and time again, the MPC 1 Live and X are a great option for anyone looking to get away from their computers and enjoy a versatile standalone music production station. However, they are by no means perfect, and many have been skeptical as to just how powerful or underpowered the hardware on these machines truly is. Especially now with so many new added functionalities, I thought it might be fun to test out some of the main concerns people have about the MPC hardware, mainly regarding their CPU and their RAM, and try to push them to their limits to find out just how much punishment these things can take. This involves some serious testing and a scientific approach. Luckily,
I'm something of a scientist myself.
if you are one of the 13,000 amazing people who have already subscribed and made this channel possible, huge welcome back and thank you so much for your support. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome to the midlifesynthesist. Let's get started. So the first common concern is regarding the 2 gigabytes of available RAM to load samples on any particular project. Now, even though the MPCs have the option of expandable storage through SD cards or hard drives to store your samples, if you want to actually use any of these samples or clips on a particular project, you must first load them up to the 2 gigabytes of available virtual memory. This 2 gigabyte limit is fixed and currently at least not expandable. This memory is also not exclusive to sample storage, as it has other functions relating to the operating system and such. Finally, unlike some of the competition like the Octatrack and the Deluge, it is not possible yet to stream directly from a hard drive, though many have speculated that that feature might be available in a future update. What keeps many people up at night is worrying about whether or not 2 gigabytes is enough space for serious producing. Should you be concerned? Let's look at some of the hard numbers first. Math doesn't lie, and thankfully, the good folks over at MPC Tutor have done most of the math for us. They have a great article about this that I'll link down below. First off, they say that no matter whether your original sample is 16 or 24-bit, it is quite irrelevant, since the MPC will load any sample and convert it into a 32-bit format, which apparently is easier for the MPC to deal with. Therefore, the amount of RAM space used by your sample will depend more on the sample length, whether it's mono or stereo, and on its sample rate, 44.1 Hz for example. Furthermore, the author states that the actual usable RAM, aside from the operating system, is actually somewhere around 1,130 megabytes, which translates to around 53 minutes of stereo samples or 106 minutes of mono samples. The truth is, I have never personally hit the memory limit on any of my real projects, and many other machines, like the immensely capable Electron Digitact, have much less RAM available for active samples, and they work just fine. That being said, I feel that knowing how much linear time 2 gigabytes can store doesn't seem to help me that much on a practical level as to understanding just how many samples I could load up, so I decided to make this first test. I made a project where I loaded as many sample-based key group instruments and drum kits as I possibly could. My results were that you can comfortably have up to around 30 drum kits and key group tracks loaded up in a project before you start getting near the limit. Any more than that and you'll start noticing severe lag on the system, as well as audio glitching and dropouts. You may even get a warning screen telling you that you're almost out of space and you should save or risk losing your information. Now, the good news is there are ways to free up some space, for example by purging samples that you're not currently using, as well as going for mono samples instead of stereo. I must say, however, that coming from the Digitact and the Octatrack, the available RAM feels like more than enough, especially since now, in the last update, you have many more internal plugin synths at your disposal and you don't have to rely solely on samples to make music. One thing that can get very annoying though are the save times if your project is very sample heavy. In this extreme experiment, my project, which was full to the brim with samples, it took upwards of 8 minutes just to save the entire project. And compared to a DAW, that's actually pretty ridiculous. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, I would really appreciate it if you could take a second and click that like button, because it helps the channel grow and I really like being here. Thanks. Next up was the CPU. Now, many naysayers have said that the MPC is just a cheap PC in a fancy suit running Linux. Now, I don't know enough about computers to deny or affirm such a claim. All I know is Akai lists the CPU of the MPC as a quad-core ARM processor. No further specifications are given, but I dare say it's powerful enough for what the MPC software needs for normal purposes. At least in my experience, it's been rock stable. Now, I do realize that many people have had their problems with their MPCs. However, I have been pretty lucky with my original Live, the MPC-X, and now the Live 2. But even though I haven't had any issues with CPU stability or power, I figured it was time to see just how much I could stack up on my MPC before it started choking. So here's test number 2. For this test, I loaded up as many instances of plug-in instruments as I could. Akai was smart enough to limit you to only 8 VSTs at a time in standalone mode, so as not to overload your system. So that poses no problem. But then I started loading up key groups and drum kits until I was hitting the memory cap, but I was still under 50% of the CPU usage. And here is where I found the MPC's Achilles heel: the effects. Now, MPCs give you many routing options, from assigning effects to entire groups or to even individual pads. So as you might expect, things can get pretty hectic pretty fast. Now, assigning all 4 effect slots to each one of my 20 programs, I was able to overload the CPU. Amazingly though, the software still runs pretty fast and smooth, and the overload is only perceptible as dropouts in individual tracks, but not as a drop in the playback as a whole, which I think was pretty impressive. And remember that this is all with the MPC running in standalone mode, so you could always hook it up to a computer if you need more horsepower. In conclusion, the MPC seems to be appropriately spec'd for its purpose, and Akai seem to have taken care with the updates as to not to overload their hardware. Also, it's pretty reassuring to know that you can easily expand its power by hooking it up to a computer and use it in controller mode. Now, even though I would have loved to demonstrate that, Akai have yet to make the MPCs compatible with the M1 chip, so I'm stuck in standalone mode for now. However, as I hope this test proves, it is way more than enough power than you will probably need to make solid and professional sounding tracks, especially when compared to the competition. What do you think? Do you think the hardware is up to snuff? Have you had any issues with your MPC dropping out or freezing? Please share your experience in the comments, and maybe we can help each other out with common issues and problems that you have. If you're new to this channel, don't be afraid to ask even the most newbie of questions. The community here is amazing, and I take care to filter out any trolls, so go ahead and jump in. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you in the next one.